Up next is the keynote conversation between Kleaver Cruz and Paula Ramirez.
Hey.
Hey, hi everybody. This is so cool.
It is. What up, y'all?
Hi. Welcome to the keynote portion of the Mosaic Lit Conference 2020. I am Paula Ramirez. As Ron noted, I am a book club member as well as a poet. And I love Literary Freedom Conference, and I was honored when they asked me if I wanted to be in keynote conversation. So thank you.
Hey, I'm Kleaver Cruz. I'm really honored to be here. As Paula shared, I too, and Ron said, I'm also a part of the One Book, One Bronx book club. Shout out to all the members. Love y'all. And yeah, I reside in the Bronx. I believe in the power of words, and I'm really excited to have this conversation on it as well. And we wanted to start with some gratitude before we really got into it. And really, before we even get into that, I just want to take a breath to acknowledge all of the incredible stories, words, ideas, book titles that have been shared already since the beginning of the conference today. So if whatever position you're most comfortable in, if that means sitting in a chair, touch the ground, if you're in bed, that's fine. I just want to take a collective breath so that we can be present here and to just be sharing a little bit of gratitude for what we've heard today, because as Paula and I were saying on the side, it all feels really aligned. And we didn't even really talk to each other across panels about what we'd be talking about. Okay, so on the count of 3, I just want you to take a deep breath in. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. And when you're ready, just exhale all the stress, anything you need to let go in this moment to be fully present. Thank you. I needed that too. I have a little bit of the jitters.
Me too.
And then we also want to do some land acknowledgement. And I just want to read something I adapted from Diana Coy Nguyen, an awesome poet and teacher. We would like to acknowledge and recognize that Paula and I and others joining from New York are currently on the unceded ancestral lands of indigenous peoples, namely the Lenape. We are grateful to these lands, and we commit to show solidarity for the continued fight of indigenous peoples everywhere and anywhere. I also want to open up a space of gratitude and thanks to our ancestors, all the spirits that did what they had to do in their lifetime so that we can gather here tonight and continuously to do so. We're thankful for them, and may they continue to guide us on our sacred and purposeful paths. Ashe.
Ashe. Great. Thank you, Kleaver. That was really necessary. And I wanted to extend we wanted to extend gratitude to everyone who came together to make this happen today. Shout out to you, Ron Kavanaugh. If you don't know him, he's a Bronx legend. Dare I say, triple OG. Ron and Literary Freedom Project, thank you for your work in our community, for the years and years of service to literary freedom, which is such a particular term that Kleaver and I are actually going to get into later. Thank you, because that mission is deeply rooted, I think, in sometimes what we dream about is Black liberation, but that can be utopia as well, right? So that's great. Shout out to you, Stephanie Alvarado, board member and book club facilitator and good friend of both of ours. Thanks for asking us to be a part of this. This is a beautiful opportunity, and I've met some really amazing people. And it was great to be in community with other people who you already know we're down. Yeah, so let's give a little mini clap. Shout out to y'all. Look at that. We are so grateful. Also, Kleaver, I'm grateful for your outfit. You look great. Shout out to you.
Good to you, friend. You know how to do it. I do what I do.
I do what I does, and I does what I do. I want to acknowledge Suhaili really quickly. So you said something about a literary libation, and we just want to note that we decided to take that on and make that for you. Thank you. We're so grateful and blessed to be in this space tonight. We wanted to start today's conversation when Kleaver and I came together, really trying to figure out, what are we going to talk about? One of the first questions was, well, what have we been reading, right? What's been coming to mind? What are words that are inspiring you? And sorry, y'all, I'm just getting to the tab. we've been reading On the Issue of Roles by Tony K Bambara. And I wanted to share the first paragraph of this essay with you, and then we can kind of delve, Kleaver, into what this means and what does it look like when we talk about Black utopia and we talk about Black future and Black liberation and moving in the now, not necessarily in the forward, right? In Blackness. Is that an accurate statement? Wow. I just did that. Okay. Really quick, if you don't know who Tony K Bambara is, author, filmmaker, activist, born in Harlem, graduated from Queens College with a theater major, shout out to that. And I thought this was really interesting, went to Paris to study mime, which I'm really committed to, like, that understanding. How do we as artists move in different forms that may not necessarily be the forms in which we usually tell our stories to help enhance that, right? So that's amazing. You know, went on to be head director of the psych ward at Metropolitan Hospital, and then went on to teach at a variety of colleges. So in case you didn't know, and now hopefully that bio made you interested and wanted to read a little more. Here we go. We're going to delve into words. I'm making some water. We're going to be chatting for an hour. I'm going to be sipping on this water. Okay.
Stay hydrated.
Okay. In the last few years, I have frequently been asked to speak on the topic of the Black woman's role in the revolution. Invariably, I get a little tongue-tied at the outset, trying to clarify some of the difficulties I have even coping with the title. What Black women did you have in mind? Each of us, after all, has particular skills and styles that suit us for particular tasks in the struggle. I'm not altogether sure we agree on the term revolution, or I wouldn't be having so much difficulty with the phrase woman's role. I have always, I think, opposed the stereotypic definitions of masculine and feminine, not only because I thought it was a lot of merchandising nonsense, but rather because I have always found that either or implicit in those definitions, antithetical to what I was all about and what the revolution for self is all about. The whole person. I am beginning to see, especially lately, that the usual notions of sexual differentiation in roles is an obstacle to political consciousness. That the way those terms are generally defined and acted upon in this part of the world is a hindrance to full development. And that is a shame. For a revolutionary must be capable of, above all, total self-autonomy. You can find that on page 1. If you have the essay laying around, shout out to all you literary folk who are watching this, you can find that right there on page 1, the first paragraph.
Woo!
Woo! You heard?
Gets me.
How does, just, I know we spoke about this a little bit when we were reading, but even hearing those words right now with, like, you know, what comes to mind?
The very first thing, and I wrote it down earlier while my hands were wet because I was so excited I heard it, was when Tasha in the first panel talked about wholeness and the importance of really that conversation about healing and the importance of healing when we're talking about revolution and the future and our state of being. That's what I think about when K or Bambara says, where is it? But rather, because I always found the either or implicit in those definitions, antithetical to what I was all about and what revolution for self is all about, the whole person. And what revolution for self is all about, the whole person. That I really appreciated that mentioned in the first panel. They talked about that, about wholeness. And I heard it in the second conversation as well to an extent. That those words of thinking about, when I'm thinking about the future or ways that we're going to exist, I'm also thinking and creating from a queer space, which for me, what I tell myself and remind my fellow queer communities is that from that place, we get to create everything and anything, because the way that the world is set up isn't for us. It's literally in service of our ending, our demise, our deaths, and that we get to create from another place. And in these words, in 1970, 50 years ago this year, in a collection that was one of the first of its kind, The Black Woman, that was centered around amplifying the voice of then emerging Black women like Nikki Giovanni, Polly Marshall, all these women that would go on to be incredible anchors in our works, were in this. And that in the middle of that book, Bambara writes this essay that is essentially saying to reject whatever notions we've been given, not just around femininity in the case of the Black woman, as the title indicates, but just gender in general, and that we have to start from a different place. And that's something I've been exploring personally too, of like, how do I want to be Cleve. That's my gender, sexuality, all the things is Kleaver. And if you understand who I am, then you get to understand that. And we're not wasting time on what I often see as unuseful or unproductiveness around that, you know, like really being with the whole person, as Bambara was saying. I feel like I'm ranting a bit.
No, absolutely. I agree. I'm grounding myself in what you're saying. And I guess this question wasn't for me, but I'll piggyback and name that it allows me, hearing these words or reading them aloud, allows me to think about and expand all of the ways in which, or really not even expand, but come to a truth and come to a transparency around all the ways in which I have had to hinder my true self in order to fit, enforce, perpetuate, and commit to the violence of cis heteroness, which is, you know, what I'm definitely in. And thinking about, as an adult person, the notions of legacy and how do you pass things on without it being structured toward gender, and what does it look like for me to be, like, as an educator, as a poet, as an actor, as someone who is just gifted in the world, what does it look like to not perpetuate those things? And hearing where are the parts of me that I've had to sacrifice in order to fit, you know?
Exactly.
Thank you. Wow, okay, we're moving on here. I was all nervous before. We're good right here.
No, I mean, that's really real what you're talking about, and that we have to be honest about that. I'm also thinking about later in the essay, which is called "On the Issues of Roles." I saw somebody asked in the comments.
On the issues of roles.
On the issues of, I'm gonna put a link. I found one where you can download the PDF for free $3.99.
Woo, heard it.
Later in the essay, Bambara says, "What are we talking about when we speak of revolution, if not a free society made of whole individuals?" So there's that term again, right? That I'm thinking about, even that word, when we're talking about freedom, revolution, utopias, all these terms that already have tons of ways that they land on people's ears.
It's weighted.
Yeah, that we have to be shared in that. And that what I'm hearing from you too is that we have to be honest on where we're not actually showing up revolutionarily. Because there'd be a lot of us out here talking about we're in the revolution, we revolutionary, and there's actually not a lot of work being done internally, because that's what she's talking about in this essay ultimately, is that if you are going to commit and employ language of revolution, that means you have to be in that process too. That don't happen outside of you. And then
how do we set it up? How do we set it up for the children who are already at a particular language and things that we may not have been in? I mean, you know, baby, I'm young, but I'm not young. And understanding that, like, we need to live and create and understand and dismantle other structures, destroy things, right? How do we destroy? Shout out to you, D. We need to kind of be in that work, starting with self, so that we can, because then I think about, like, how do I then, you know, I've worked with students and young people for over 10 years. How do I then step into those rooms and not name that and be in that? So
exactly.
Thank you for the affirmation.
Yeah.
Love ya. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I'm curious, what is, in this conversation of a whole person, what does that mean to you? What comes up when we're talking about the wholeness of oneself?
Yeah. Automatically, what came to my mind right now when you asked me that question was, like, the wholeness of myself in my Blackness and all of that versus the wholeness in which I've had to sort of create for people to look at me and be like, oh, that person's okay, they're fine. Or for family members and community to be like, oh, they're good, they got it. So I thought about myself for a second. But when I think about what is the whole, just like one's interpretation of how one's spiritual, physical, and mental affect the world and the community around them. right? Being able to see that. And coming from I'm from the Bronx as well. Everyone knows this, but in case you didn't know, coming from the Bronx, coming from particular defensive environments and defensive identities and what that looks like, it's been difficult in younger. Oh, I thought I dropped my literary libration. It was difficult in younger adulthood to kind of navigate the world in a wholeness. For my survival, I was like, I can't be whole out here, right? Like, I have to move in portions of myself, or else I'm not going to make it. And many times I didn't. You know what I mean? And I speak about today about even how like the fullness of me certain parts of me may not have made it.
Right.
And what does that look like? And I think having all of those things in alignment and pushing toward that, one experiences wholeness.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
When you were sharing, something that also came to mind that is a question I've had about, I'll say like cis-het people in particular, is I'm just thinking about my own experiences and the people around me that I've come to get close to inside of queerness, LGBTQ, the alphabet soup, is that all of us to a certain extent have to have a reckoning with who we are, and then a conscious living into that then, right? That I had to have my own reckoning around my queerness, for example, my sexuality, and then act and create from that place actively, right? And I always wonder, it feels like with cis-het people in particular, there isn't always necessarily that, right? Like you're living in a world that is affirming a certain sexuality, right? So that, I would just wonder sometimes the activeness around that. Like, because I'm saying all that to say, because in this essay, to go back to Bambara's words, that's what it feels like. It's not that she's saying, fuck feminine, fuck masculine, all that. She's saying, reject all of it so that then you get to create whatever is necessary for you to exist in your wholeness and your fullness. And that would mean that you get to be inside of femininity or masculinity or none of it or whatever it is. But that she's saying that the revolution requires you to consciously create, to actively create those things. And so sometimes I wonder in that dismantling that you're talking about for cis-het people, that's involved, right? Like you might even, I'm wondering, like, does that even mean consciously claiming heterosexuality, not as an affirmation that the world told you, but that you've done the reckoning, like, yeah, this is who I am. Does that make sense?
That makes sense because it's how, well, it make, clearly I'm not speaking for all cis-het. Do I have to say that? Let's say that, right? I'm naming that's the way I understand sexuality. I mean, cis heterosexuality because of my community and the people who are close to me and the identities and the sexualities that range within that from an early age. I'm also going to name in whatever sort of cis-het identity I exist in, violence and sexuality are also very much tied to that. Like a woman's sexuality isn't just, it's not the same as whatever a man's sexuality is supposed to be, or whatever those violent portions that are perpetuated onto us. There's even a violence in that. So if you want to know my personal, and like, let's keep it cute, but naming that like my sense of sexuality or my sense of cis hetero woman identity is also very much an understanding of violence and knowing those things. And those things I know are harder to sort of dismantle, being the untruths of those things so that you can get to a greater space of then being able to. I know that for me, I've been blessed with like a perfect alignment of community, so that I could even be in my own awareness around the old violence that enhances my cis hetero patriarchy, yeah.
It's nice to have you as a friend. Something else I also wrote down that she said in this essay, which I feel it connects to what we're saying, because part of how I've understood community in the most loving sense is also family, right? That part of, like I was saying, with is very typical, normal, I don't know what the words are, but in my experience and definitely of most of the other queer people in my life, we have to make up our families, our own chosen people around us that can affirm us and love us in the ways that we know the world often can't or won't be willing to. And Bambara says of family in the revolutionary sense, she says the family in this vision, the family was no longer a socially ordained nuclear unit to perpetuate the species or legitimate sexuality, but an extended kinship of cellmates and neighbors linked in the business of of actualizing a vision of a liberated society. And thinking, I love that she uses cellmates and neighbors. Love is a funny word to use in that context, but that she's thinking about all of us, right? When we're talking about all Black lives and that type of language, that in language, in that sentence, she's also including incarcerated people and the other people who are also having these conversations that you and I are having, but have been distanced from us so that we're not privy to them, or we can't participate or listen or learn from them. I'm just thinking about, I'm curious whether it's in thinking about books or just your own thoughts on community in this utopian sense or in this freedom sense. What does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
That's wild, because I swear that I have the same question for you. So, and the things that I don't have a full answer, but I guess I see it in parts. Like, I think something like this, through digital accessibility, which has its own challenges and things around that. But like, this is a great example of how we sort of carve those pieces and do whatever is necessary in order to like transcend what we understand as our immediate community and try to build it too. Because I think that's important, because we are often like in our own communities, then how do we connect those and build those? And again, I can only name from my own, when I think about it in this utopic sense, I don't even mean to sound privileged, but I think it looks like the structures of the current community that I live in. I think about the pockets, and you know me personally, so I think you know what I'm trying to say. Like, I think about the pockets of community that I have and how those communities have been able to build upon each other and expand and become their own. And there's no sort of like, you have to get to this person to get through this person. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's no gatekeeping. There's like networking, but we're building love and we're building interpersonal relationships. You know what I mean?
Yes. I was about to say something and then I drew a blank. It was like something you said, but it'll come back later.
Yeah. And in regards to what you said about having to create your own community, I really appreciate your honesty and your relevance around that. So thank you for naming that. Yeah. So I was reading the chat. I was like, oh, people are saying, okay.
Well, I was gonna say too, I think what you said about the violence piece is really important. Because I think also what Bambara is getting at in this piece is about being truthful, you know, like that question you said earlier, or where you were naming as like, I have to go inwards to check where's my homophobia or these types of things showing up. That I think part of what can inhibit, we're literally seeing it, right? That even if we're talking about inside of Black communities, who is most at risk is Black trans women, right? And that we know that part of why that is occurring is because of this cis hetero inability to be with the truth, right? That we can be free, we can be our whole selves, and that there's a constant reminder of what a person is not or is unwilling to be when other people are free around them. It's going back to when people talk about like being yourself allows other people to be themselves. But I think added to that is it also prompts people to be with themselves, and that not everybody wants to be with that. And I don't mean just interpersonally, of course, that collectively, structurally, otherwise, there's an inability and unwanting to give up that power. The false power, really, because that's a prison to not be able to express yourself fully, to be fully self-expressed. But what I'm saying is I'm just thinking about those violences and how that is such a strong color that all of this gets painted with, right? That is part of how we come up against all of these things is through that type of, I mean, violence is the word. I can't even think of another word. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is it necessary for me? What more can I add to that notion? Because we're literally naming, like, I don't need to come in as a cishet person and affirm what you're saying. Like, you literally just said that, name that.
Is the truth, and that how are we with that for real?
I will also name that I don't have, as being part of implicit systems, like I only have breakaway, revolutionary things that work for me and what that looks like. I don't claim to try to move into communities and be like, this is what you have to do. With the help and support of folks, when you're watching all these other people and experts who you saw on the panel, with readings, with healing, with talking, with hosting, with meditating, with destroying, with surviving, with standing up for people, like these are the ways in which you learn how you dismantle your own violence in order to become something bigger. I'm never going to, I think it's unfair to even try to perpetuate that. You know what I mean? That's its own white supremacy. That's its own violence.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It hit me earlier. Another thread.
Can I just finish what I was going to say real quick?
Yes.
Sorry. And I know that I've had to die many times, you know, in order to become who I am today. Yeah. And what that looks like in terms of my community and what I mean to my community and how I stand in that. And because of what we're naming around cis heteropatriarchy, I'm still dying, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, that's okay. And cis heteropatriarchy on like public levels, because like I also understand that to be how we present ourselves to the world and to the public, and not to who I need to be or who I necessarily move in as a person, right? And naming that like many of those things have to die in order for you to show up in that way.
Word. I'm just giving a pause to take that in.
You can. I'm going to have a drink because I think I earned that.
What I was going to say earlier was a thread that I'm sensing from all the panels, not just this conversation, but this is the word practice, right? That revolution, or even the cause of one, the experience of one, is through the doing of things, that we have to be in practice. And that we've heard, which I want to uplift immensely, can never say it enough, is the relationship to land, right? To all living things. This past couple of months, I've taken these intentional walks to really re-educate myself on that, of like, how am I truly connected to these other living forms outside of humans, LOL to humans. But yeah, how am I connected to these things that are alive? Suhaili was talking about that in her practice, right? That these plants, even if it's not for herbal medicine, the fact that they're alive is linked to us, because in this species, because there is arguably one that we're in as humans, there's a link to that. But I'm saying that all about practices, right? That we have to be in practice around our understanding around plants, around our connectedness, around our internal interrogations of how we're showing up and how we need to change or cause whatever necessary deaths. Makes me think of the tarot card, the death card. The deaths that we need to experience in order to really be our whole free selves, you know?
Yes, I agree 100%. I think it's shady that you would name it with all the plants behind you, knowing that I don't have no damn plants in here. Okay, I'm gonna let you hold, because you're right. Sue is definitely right about that, but you know, damn, no, I'm playing.
It's true, because there's literally an abundance of life when we're present to it. Even living in the Bronx, but seeing that there's true.
Well, I'm sorry, especially not even living in the Bronx, especially living in the Bronx.
It's literally the greenest borough.
You have the most greenery. Now I'm tired of this shit. Hold on, I gotta pop my real quick. You have the most greenery out of all 5 boroughs. Never get it twisted, okay? I know you know this. I'm telling this to our people who are watching. Go home and let everybody know. Google it. The Bronx has greenery, and to your point, you know, the connectivity between our land, the ways in which community itself is structured so that we are not connected to land, and then we live more stressful and deeply violent lives and understandings of who we are because of it. We're born into disconnect because of it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's so important to know and to ground ourselves that the Bronx is 25% green/parks. Thank you, Ron Kavanaugh, for putting that in the chat.
Come on, like we got the biggest parks.
Think about, you know, often working in education and working with young people, I've seen them map out community gardens and community spaces and stuff like that. Shout out to all the schools that had community gardens that I worked in District 9. And thinking about, you ask kids to create their perfect image of the block, or what would the school look like if you can design it? What's the perfect school? And they put all of this lush greenery around, and we enhance and perpetuate that understanding as kids get older. Like, oh yeah, we don't have greenery here, and that's a violent notion, right? Like, I cut you off just to name all that. I don't know what you were gonna say, but
no, I was just saying. When I said even the Bronx, I meant actually was what you were saying is this idea that when you're living in a city, particularly in New York City, you're disconnected. And that when you're in the Bronx, like you said. It's actually greener than the other parts of New York.
No.
And that even if there was only a small plant, is what I'm saying. Like the other day, I was in a cab, and it was like in a tunnel, and there was like a tiny little plant growing out of this concrete. And for me, it was like, that's it, right? We are that plant. We know what it looks like to push through to the sun, to the air, to get what we need, despite some inanimate or this thing that's trying to weigh us down, that we are that. And I wonder sometimes, what can it be if we connect to that? I heard somebody earlier say that there's some things we have to redefine and some things we have to reconnect to. And I would say as one of the things we have to reconnect with. A lot of people are I mean, again, this ain't new by any stretch. We have people like Suhaili, we have people like Soul Fire Farm. There's so many examples around us right now of the importance of being connected to land and these other living things with us, because the truth is, all that shit is older than us. Moss has been around for as long as the roaches. There's something we got to learn from those things, right? And that moss arguably is a communal plant. It spreads. Wherever you see a little bit of moss, there's a lot of moss somewhere else. In bunches and cracks, along walls, along the sidewalk. And I just wonder, how do we glean from that type of stuff? That's not superfluous. That's important, those type of examples. Because there's something there. The moss literally has outlived our species. Mm-hmm. What can we learn from that? And in that sense, how do we take care of it too, so it can keep existing, so we can keep learning from it?
Right. And I think, I don't know the answer, but I think the understanding is that you have to do the work internally in order to see the moss. Like, many things outlive us. The moss, the roaches, right? All even you talk about like pushing toward the air, all these things we're long gone, and all these things still remain.
Exactly.
We are born and we are perpetuated and pushed into systems, often violent, that tell us what we have to pay attention to versus not. And I'm going to name, this is a deeply spiritual and academic panel as well. And naming and sort of, we have to also get rid of those systems in order so that people can have whatever sort of understanding and connectivity to ideology that they need in order to see the moss. We can't assume because we're all from the same place, people could see the moss.
Exactly.
You can see it on you and see it or not. And I think there has to be a greater empathy toward those things, because we all, especially as Black people, move in the world like, okay, I saw the moss, so I'm going to move that way. Right. And I'm going to hang out with people who move that way. And I'm going to do talks and be in community and write books for and do poems for people who move that way.
Yeah.
And what are we doing if not being gatekeepers and perpetuating the idea that, like, we talk about that, but it's like, what are we doing to ensure that the hood can notice the moss? Like, what are we doing for the hood?
Exactly.
That's
the moss is in the hood too.
That to me is utopia, which is kind of what we're going to push into. What were you saying?
No, that's a perfect segue. I was going to ask you your thoughts on.
Oh, great. Well, that's my question. No, I was going to ask you that. What is Black utopia? What is Black utopia? They asked you to come today in this digital, space. And I ask you, and I also in this moment, I know you're the keynote, but I want all Black people who are watching this to, like, if you're watching with someone else, pose that question to that person. Take this question and text it to a homie, a partner. See what they say. What is Black utopia? If you're part of our panel right now, I'm asking you, what is Black utopia? Pop it in the chat.
Come on, interaction. I see it as, I think it's tied to Black joy in the sense of when I think about Black joy in this Black joy work, I always talk about how it's, for me, my thought process is not just about the revolution, but what comes after. And in a sense, for me, utopia is what can come after. I didn't say it does come, but it can come after. In the sense of this world, again, not to beat a dead horse, but again, uplifting what Tasha and others were saying earlier about wholeness and healing, the importance of wellness, that in that utopia, we get to be well, for real. And that we don't experience suffering and these types of things. And that when we do experience it, because maybe that is just an inevitable part of the human experience is suffering, is that we get the healing and support that we need when it occurs, and not having to deal with shit on our own, not having to have compacted inherited trauma over and over again, but that we get to heal from that. Is what that feels really important to me in the utopian vision, is that we get to be healed and well, and then we get to create whatever comes after that, which presumably I can't even fully imagine yet, because we got to imagine the healing first.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I just rewound it back to you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think about, yeah, a really similar understanding of Black utopia. Utopia, the word itself seems a little bit, not even a discomfort, but just maybe foreign. And thinking more about like liberation, Black freedom, and that lending itself to a closer version. So then we could start to begin to figure out utopia and really what does it mean to be free in the whole self.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as we named before, that translates then into our community and how we see other people.
I agree.
Said something really interesting. I'm trying to remember it. Oh, it threw me off.
I do have a question for you, though.
Yeah, keep going, and I'll see if I remember it.
Well, I was just thinking about, again, what you were saying earlier about inside of these conversations, and what we even talked about before this conversation, was we also have to be willing to talk about and admit where we still have work to do, and where we have to undo or whatever the thing is. And I'm saying that to say, like, in this creation or moving towards the whole person, I think what can happen is a fear of being that, like, again, going back to why some of these violences and things occur, is fear-based. It's the fear of being your whole self, the fear of undoing whatever you think is going on in your brain or you've been conditioned to believe. And I'm looking at the one that came the most organically in the shower. The question to ask you is that, well, I'm gonna talk to the audience first. So Paula this year has been one of my examples for choosing yourself and your wellness fiercely, right? That it meant going inward and to really do really difficult work that a lot of people are afraid to do and are actually willing to live the rest of their lives to carry with. And I'm not going to get into the details because it's not the space for it, but Paula really has been one of the examples for me of what happens when you choose yourself fiercely and choose your wellness in particular fiercely. And so I'm curious for you to share with us, is if there any one lesson or anything that we can get from this journey you've been on, a life, but in this year in particular?
That is a great question, Kleaver. Now, I've often since December 1st thought about, if I had to write down what I learned, what would it be? And here we are at December 12th, and I've yet to do that. But I told myself I had the whole month. And here we are. What's the answer? So I know only that I feel a deep sense of gratitude and love for who I am every day. And I don't use any word lightly in that statement, you know. And what I learned in order to reach this sense of peace that is always growing and always expanding itself is that sort of my version of a perfect life is one where I'm able to choose myself, and therefore that means the world and things around me and things that have nothing to do with me. Choosing myself puts forth positivity and something in the world that can help people live, grow, and not survive, but thrive.
Come on.
And my entire life, I've understood survival as winning. And whatever circumstances that I've come across in my life have forced me into a survival mode that didn't allow me to thrive. And on paper, I felt like a very successful person. And spiritually, I wasn't. And naming Suhaili and land too, like having to, in the beginning of the year, January, it's going to be January in a couple weeks now, is my birthday. And at the beginning of 2020, prior to everything, I mean, like even prior to like shocking celebrity deaths and like news things, at the beginning of the month, I left New York City and I went to Puerto Rico. And I think being in Puerto Rico really allowed me to disconnect the notions of whoever I thought I needed to be in order to survive. And I, for the first time in my life, despite success, really felt like I was thriving. And I felt it in my feet when I walked, you know, and I felt it in the morning when I took a shower down my hair. And I felt it when I went to El Junque, and I felt it when I was at the beach, and I felt it when I passed by my grandfather's homes, and I felt it every time I cried. So when I understand sort of this idea of like taking care of myself and being that, making that choice to then perpetuate and ripple on to something greater in the world. And now I remember what I was going to say about Utopia. A utopia to me isn't necessarily no pain, because I think I just see the world in a pragmatic way, and I understand, maybe it's the artist in me, I don't know, but I understand pain to not be part of like the Black experience, but part of a human experience, you know? Right. And I think, shout out to humans again. And I think that I'm an alien, and I think that I've been able to find the humanity in pain often. And I think in a utopia, taking those skills and dismantling those fears in order to address pain in a way that allows us to move forward wholly, to then choose ourselves, to then perpetuate better in the world. Absolutely. So I answered that question backwards, but I think you got it. Okay.
No, I just cried a thug tear behind these glasses that you can't see.
A thug tear, I know. I feel like I'm crying too.
It's just really important what you're saying, because again, what I'm hearing, and again, because I literally have read this essay at least twice a month for the last year, since last December. And there's a section where she talks about, Bambara talks about, oh my God, I just drew a blank. It'll come later, but.
The last paragraph, because I'm going to go to that.
Let's go to it.
All right, let's go to it. I'll read it out loud and let's see what happens. Folks, again, we're referencing Tony K Bambara's on the issue of roles. Okay, so Kleaver has a PDF that they are going to share with all y'all.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, the last paragraph. Did you actually edit that, or should I read the whole?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I think Kleaver.
Okay, to set it up. Actually, I'm gonna read it first and then I'll explain it. So it says, "It may be lonely, certainly painful. It'll take time. We've got time. That, of course, is an unpopular utterance these days. Remember, this was written in 1970. Instant coffee is the hallmark of current rhetoric." We can put Instagram, Twitter, social media to substitute that.
So let's try that again. Instagram
is the hallmark of current rhetoric.
There we go.
Brackets, because we had a literary conference, so Bambara didn't say that, we put them. But we do have time. We'd better take the time to fashion revolutionary selves, revolutionary lives, revolutionary relationships. Mouth don't win the war. It don't even win the people. Neither does haste, urgency, and stretch out now insistence. Not all speed is movement. And she goes on to give examples of what that looks like. And then she concludes with, "If your house ain't in order, you ain't in order. It is so much easier to be out there than right here. The revolution ain't out there yet, but it is here, should be. And arguing that instant coffee 10 minutes to midnight alibi to justify hasty-headed dealings with your mate is shit. Ain't no such animal as an instant guerrilla, Guerilla, as in a warrior, as in a revolutionary." And what Bambara is talking about really is, it's tied to what she's saying in the page before, where she's asserting that we have to let go of all these made up ideas about gender roles and gender, like we were saying earlier, and starting from another place. She's recommending Blackhood. And the reason I didn't quote that, because I would put an asterisk. I think that is so expansive in the ways that that could be defined, that could be your starting point. I'm just not necessarily only saying that's the only starting point. But she's saying to abandon that, let that go, and create from a conscious place. Because again, like we've been saying throughout this conference at this point, is about wholeness. It's really about one's well-being. And that means an everyday thing. That means even the small things, you know, that all these little moments and stuff is what builds a revolution, you know, like even if we talk about this summer, or this past year, is all of these deaths, they're not initial. You know, I've been reading Ida B. Wells's autobiography that got published in the 19th century, and so much of it is relevant, you know, like she's talking about violences and these conditions of Blackness that are not exactly the same till today, but they relate. Is what I'm saying is that it's a long line, and I'm wearing this Sankofa ring, hey, to remember that, right? That we have to reach back and able to move forward as well. That it's literally what we've been practicing when we're talking about practice, right? Reading an essay from 50 years ago as a way to inform how we might move in the future. And as Paula has been underscoring, in the present, most importantly, is our being now is what creates tomorrow, is what creates the future we want to live in. That's my rap.
Well, that's Kleaver's rap, folks. Really quickly, I think we have 3 minutes left, maybe even 2, I'm not sure. If someone could confirm that for me on our end, that's great. Cleve, can you tell us, you know, you have a book coming out in 2022, The Black Joy Project with Harcourt. Tell us a little bit about the book, if you can, and what folks can look forward to, maybe in 1 minute.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I started a project in 2015, very spiritually, not with a plan or some big scheme. I literally woke up depressed, and I was trying to figure out how to move forward from that. And the long and short of that is that I remembered moments with people like Paula, like my family, like other people in my community, memories, tastes, smells, that was a reminder that even in the face of whatever I was experiencing, and in that year in particular, I was experiencing loss and all kinds of things. I was deep in organizing, that there was joy, and that joy was part of my fuel, part of our fuel, to keep doing what we were doing. And so I decided that to make me feel a little better, I'd do something for the entire month of December in 2015, where I would post a picture of somebody expressing Black joy, and that hopefully by the end of that month, I could feel a little bit better. And in that process, what ended up coming out of it was an Instagram account that then turned into this real life journey around the African diaspora, from South Africa to the Netherlands to Cuba to Brazil, all these different places, being in community with Black folks. That this book is a manifestation of all of us, of all the community that I built. So you'll be able to read essays that I've written about Black joy. You'll hear from voices across the diaspora who will be writing about their experiences in places like Nigeria and Brazil and South Africa and in Europe. And there's going to be hundreds of images that will range from
Woo! From this to that. I don't mean to cut you off, but we have no more time. Kleaver, thank you so much.
Thank you, friend.
Thank you, friend. Thank you again to Mosaic Literary Conference 2020.